Imagine a night of live music, erotica, spirituality, a dance floor hosted by all-female DJs, all designed around a particular theme. These are the immersive one-night festivals that Fox&Badge have become known for. In May, they presented Shakti Rising, where participants were invited to, quote, enter a world deeply inspired by the teachings of ancient India, where the body was not an obstacle to enlightenment, but the very temple itself. The night promised to explore Tantra, Kama Sutra, music, ritual, and other ancient traditions.
If you're thinking this maybe sounds a little fraught, you're not alone. One skeptical attendee worried it might become, quote, a bastardized fancy dress party. In the weeks leading up to the event, it sparked passionate criticism online and even calls to boycott it.
And yet, if you're thinking this could be a beautiful attempt to celebrate another culture, you're not alone. The event attracted far more South Asian attendees than a typical Fox&Badge gathering does, many of whom described feeling genuinely welcomed, represented, and celebrated. This is pretty significant for this type of sex-positive space, where people of color often say they feel unwelcome or worse, fetishized. Thoughtful people looked at exactly the same event and arrived at very different conclusions.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge these conversations are difficult. We genuinely wrestled with how best to have this one. Ideally, we would have had a dialogue between everyone involved. That proved pretty tricky. Instead, we invited Alex and Lauren, the co-directors of the event, to reflect candidly about their experience. While we also reached out to South Asian attendees, people who chose not to attend, we read public responses, and we've tried to weave those perspectives into today's conversation.
We know we won't get this perfectly right either, but we'd rather be the people who are willing to have difficult conversations with openness, with humility and integrity, than avoid them altogether. So if today's episode sparks thoughts, disagreements, or perspectives you think we haven't considered, we genuinely want to hear from you. We've included our email in the show notes because we see this as an ongoing conversation and an invitation to keep learning together.
So today we are generously joined by Fox&Badge co-directors Alex Haw and Lauren Katalinich to reflect on what they hoped to create, what happened when different perspectives collided, and what this experience might teach all of us. What happens when a sincere attempt at cultural bridge building encounters different histories, different sensitivities, different experiences of harm, and radically different interpretations? And in a world that seems increasingly certain about who's right and who's wrong, how do we stay curious enough to keep building bridges? Most of us were given a cookie-cutter template for how to live, love, and succeed. But what if you don't fit that mold? What if you're ready to live a little differently, even if that makes you the odd one out?
We're Nyla and Cole, two people questioning the systems, the stories, and the identities that shape us. From politics to pleasure, culture to connection, this is where taboo meets truth.
If you've ever felt like a black sheep, cycle breaker, or someone who doesn't quite fit the cookie-cutter mold, then you're a deviant just like us.
All right, so firstly, welcome, Alex and Lauren. Great to have you here.
Great to be here.
And guys, I'm not even going to attempt to try and introduce you because you both have these incredible histories of what brought you to today. One of the things we'd love to learn about you is kind of the off-script journey that brought you here to do what you do. Maybe start with you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. It's an absolute honor to be here. I find myself a little bit surprised how I got here. It's been a strange and wonderful ride, but I guess the key thrust was I wanted to be an artist in some way. I didn't have the guts. I was like, how am I going to make money? So I became an architect. And then I went to work, and that was traumatic because it was like, it's not like art. It's extremely boring, and it's all about insurance and risk aversion and regulations. What do you mean? I'm a complete rebel. I hate regulations. So, in order to try and break out of it, you have to work even harder. And I needed some kind of safety valve. And my safety valve, to prevent me working through the night, I set up this dining club called Latitudinal Cuisine, where we would eat food from all around the world. We would all cook. It's a collaborative effort, like what I do now. We're all from different places. I'm half French. Food had always been a huge part of my culture, and it was actually quite a sacred thing. And so I did that for probably 8 years. Like, we did this, an event a week. sometimes 4. We did big street parties for 300 people once, where we sat down one long
Wow.
table in the street. And that was like my attempt to stop myself working, but also just discovering, actually, I really have a community wound. I was brought up in a tiny village and I really want to connect to people. And so I think that project was a cultural project that was trying to build community. And later on, I was getting into music. I was listening to so much techno, and I'm falling in love, and it's healing me. It's doing so much good. I'm like, oh my God, what is this? We need to work with techno, not just food. And so that was what led me to start running dance parties in my living room. And then they started expanding, and I started adding performance, art, decor, kink. Suddenly one of them we're having sex in it. And it's like, oh, what's happening? Okay, this is interesting. And it was
Yeah.
just emerging. There was no plan. Like, I've never written a business plan. It's just intuitively what feels alive. And now for me, this project is suddenly extremely expansive. It's like my dream come true, where I get to kind of go through the world like, who is amazing right now? You can just call them up and say, can we work together? It could be anyone. Like, now I'm really getting into live music. So any gig I see, I can go up backstage and say, hey, we've got this little tiny thing we do. Do you want to come play? And it's a constant invitation to play. And it's a way of combining my interest in culture. The brain is getting something, but what's most important is the soul is now getting something. There's a spirituality to it. So it feels like, to me, Fox&Badge is a kind of artistic experiment in expanding your consciousness and your soul a little bit. It's highly pretentious, right? It's terrible. Am I crazy? It's just a filthy nightclub.
I love that. Thank you. And I was actually going to bring up this quote a little later. But Nyla and I both read the letter you wrote about this event that we're going to get into. And a line I pulled from it was you saying, for all the ways travel broadens the mind, living in a community refines the soul. Which I think is quite
Loved it.
beautiful. And it kind of sums up what you just said. You've traveled the world, both physically and with these cuisine nights. But what you're doing now is being a community builder, it sounds like. And with these events, you're also building community.
Yeah, and it's interesting to bring up the topic of travel, because I love travel. It's like something that came to me relatively late. And actually, funnily enough, my first major intense travel experience was in India. And so in a way, that's the benchmark. And so that's what I'm finding a little bit with this project, is we're like traveling through culture, but in a way where we're being hosted by it and having very meaningful, the deepest of conversations with those cultures in order to try and understand what is not other about that culture. That's the key essence of this.
Yeah. No, beautiful. I would love to bring in Lauren and just hear your off-script journey. What brings you here, Lauren?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here. I'm from Iowa, which is a kind of farm state in the middle of the US. I grew up quite close to nature, quite naturally spiritual, but also very nerdy, I would say. And I was extremely anti-partying, and I would be like a serious party pooper, like no drinking, quite judgmental around all of that stuff. I wanted to go to university just to study, and I was so annoyed that people were just like partying all the time. It was actually like a repression of something I was scared of in myself, I think, now. But I moved to the UK 10 years ago, and that was like hugely expansive for me, because I never lived in a city. Just the intense array of experiences and cultures that I suddenly was being exposed to, my mind was just exploding. And then I met a friend who introduced me to psychedelics, was like, ayahuasca, you should try it. And that just, changed my whole view on the world. And it also left me feeling quite unmoored, like, okay, actually, I'm seeing that a lot of these things that I'm doing aren't really resonating. I don't feel like they're me. I feel like I've been pushing myself in directions that I don't fit. But the biggest gift that it gave me was around dance. So it was like very clear message that you should dance. And I didn't dance. I was maybe dancing out occasionally, but I had like a physical transformation where I felt like I could really feel music and express and kind of channel that. And so
Wow.
That's
really cool.
feel incredibly grateful for that gift. So that just became my kind of practice, trying to connect with the self. And then I met Alex at a dance in the woods. So originally when Alex and I met, I had offered to do welfare or some kind of caretaking space at Fox&Badge. But I ended up performing and dancing with some friends. Yeah,
Wow.
that was a beautiful experience. I'd never done anything like that. And my first Fox&Badge this was in 2021, and it really felt like finding my people for the first time. I'd never
Nice.
seen people who were just so open, and it really opened up my sensuality, my artistic side, and it's an absolute joy, like dream to like work on this together, and especially to explore each of the themes. And this theme, Shakti Rising, the most recent one, I had reservations because I was just being a bit conservative about like, hey, ticket sales are always hard. Maybe we shouldn't make our life really hard by doing something difficult.
Sure.
But Alex is really insistent. This is very important. Like, this is rich. We should do this. And the whole experience, like the essence of that event being there felt so much deeper, had so much more texture, to be having people from that culture there representing, exploring, and sharing, than if we were doing something like Vikings, where there's no, we're pulling from kind of fantasy and stories, but it doesn't have the same authenticity to it. So for me, it was a huge shift in Fox&Badge and what we kind of want to do. I think it felt there was a lot of positive reception around the spiritual side.
It sounds like you have been through multiple reinventions of yourself. And to find dance, I'm almost imagining that you went through this experience and then you became this like amazing dancer that then is suddenly performing on stages. Like, that's quite an incredible skill to take away.
That's what it felt
Nyla,
like.
She's
are you
exquisite.
convinced? Should we do ayahuasca? I'm strongly considering.
It was suddenly as if my body could hear the music in a way that it couldn't before, so it could just really respond. And
Yeah, I love that. So great to hear that story. Thank you. And for you too, Alex, so much inspiration in being able to have courage to step off the well-trodden path, right? One of the reasons Cole and I love doing this podcast is because we just love hearing about people who've had the courage to take the untrodden path and try something different.
In a funny way, I don't necessarily see it as courage, because there wasn't a choice. Like, actually, often a lot of these things were forced by a crisis of like an emotional meltdown. Like, the body was doing it for me. It was just taking me on that journey, like through depression. I'm like, I actually can't go to work anymore. I actually can't do this inauthentic life. At some point you can't choose, because it breaks of its own accord. And so that whole structure, just if you can listen to the surrender call.
Yeah, and there's a gift in that. Can you say a little bit more about Fox&Badge? What is it? What do you create?
Yeah, it feels like it gets more and more difficult to answer. You'd think that, like, with the amount of marketing you do, it's like a really kind of quick, slick thing. But I guess currently it's a whole range of events that we run, and what we're most well known for and what most of our energy goes into is large scale, epic nighttime festivals. Basically, the very core is dance floors. Our main dance floor is female-led, always. We explore a theme, and our interest in those themes is not decorative, it's therapeutic. And that sounds really crazy to everyone, and we probably are crazy, but we authentically feel that we can all learn and travel through the archetypes represented by those themes and allow that to unleash that part of ourselves. Our next theme is Bacchanal, spirit of Dionysus. So in a polytheistic culture, those gods, to my mind, are a little bit like an internal family system representation of parts of selves, right? They each pull us into different parts. And so here we're all generally in the Apollonian, the cerebral, intellectual, word-based linguistic mode. Here we are talking right now. But the complement to that is Dionysus, who invites us back into our body, into wild abandon. And so that is, for us, a crucial therapeutic modality we all need to be back in our bodies, to learn how to dance. He's the god of theater. So for us, it's not just a beautiful artistic project. It's a therapeutic one, and it has lots of different elements to it. So I've mentioned the DJs. We have now a live music room at every event. We've always got a high erotic content. We used to allow people to have sex at the events. That comes with all kinds of difficulties. We used to safeguard it. We still do, but we don't allow penetration anymore. We just allow what we feel is a bit more like collective eros, collective effervescence. As soon as that topic arises, that's what we get categorized by. And I think that was one of the problems of this event. It's like, it's a sex party. It's like, oh my God, what's he talking about? It must be a sex party kind of thing. In the same way that everyone's like, well, it's a rave, right? Obviously, it's in a nightclub with a dance floor. That's what it is. But not really. Like, what quality of rave opens with a ritual and a procession and a prayer and a sacrament, and like prayers of gratitude and lots of immersive characters walking around. As you can see, I'm struggling to put this into one sentence, but it's a complex beast, which is complemented by other elements. We just ran last Saturday, our first ever ritual.
Yeah, the ritual felt like if it was a one-night festival, as Fox&Badge, this was like a one-day retreat kind of thing, a bit more on the therapeutic side, but it emerged, I think, because of Shakti Rising, and increasingly through the large events, we've wanted to do things like, how do we take everyone on a cohesive journey? How do we go deeper into some of these communal practices? The archetypes thing that Alex mentioned is absolutely key for me. And every time that I doubt it, because I was like, oh, can we do that? Just to feel the difference in energy at the different events through the different themes, I'm always astounded. When we did Carnival, which was just feathers and samba dancers, it was so bright. Everyone was so happy. Then when we were at Mad Max, it was like dark energy, warriors, still loving, but you can feel people stepping in to these aspects of the self and exploring them. Versailles, we did so refined, like quite coy and playful in a way. So yeah, I'm always surprised at the events because we pull all these elements together, but you don't know how it's going to feel on the night.
Yeah.
Just two quick things for me. The fact that it's so hard to put these events you throw into any kind of category, I think is really illustrative of what we're going to talk about more, of just how complex this whole conversation is. There's so many different kinds of parties, sex parties, raves, you name it. There's so many different kinds of spiritualities. I think probably a lot of this debate was people trying to put all these things into clear black and white categories that simply don't exist. The complexity is what we're talking about. And then I haven't been to any Fox&Badge events. They sound amazing. But an important thing to understand is that attendees need to participate in the theme. Dress code is not an option. If you show up in t-shirt and shorts, you'll be turned away. You need to be a participant in creating that theme that Lauren was just describing, right? And so people needed to come to this event, for example, supporting the South Asian theme, which I know created a lot of complications for you, which we're going to get into.
Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing that out. It's like fascinating that, one succinct description, I use neither of those words, is costume party.
Yeah.
Right.
It's quite weird. How did I miss that all out, But like, yeah, I felt for a while like I don't really have permission to be an artist. I didn't go to art school. And I feel that I see that all around me all the time from everyone. We're obviously all creators. And so one of the foundation, the best thing about these events is what everyone comes as. It's their contribution, it's their gift. You don't really need to do anything more. Anything more is encouraged. It's like, this doesn't work without you. Consumers create dead culture. Participants create live. We all make this together, however alive you are. The other word is parties. And I have like an increasing aversion to that word, which is terrible because it sounds really joyless as I go to less of them. But I have a little bit of like, those are avoidant structures where we meet to release, but there's not a kind of great purpose to them. When there's a sort of sense of like, you're doing that because you can't face the other shit a little bit, that's not what we really want to kind of promote in a way as a sort of avoidancy. It's more like a confrontation, actually. And so I never describe them as parties.
I actually find this a really fascinating and layered way of describing the experience. I have been to Fox&Badge events before, and I think the word that I come back to over and over again is immersive, because I think it connects to the idea of archetypes and costume and permission giving. There's something about choosing to intentionally embrace and adorn with the theme of the night and And it almost gives you permission to step into, to explore, to discover, to uncover. And I think that's what I noticed about the first Fox&Badge I went to, and the community I went with insisted that I take the theme seriously, you know. It doesn't matter if you look sexy. What matters is you're on theme, you know. And the first time I came, just realizing actually you don't have to spend a lot of money. You have to just invest some creativity, some creative energy. I really loved seeing how people step into the theme. Everybody steps in. There is some stuff that is just next level, and it creates a space like no other.
It feels like a gift. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, let's get into it, guys. I really want to talk to you about Shakti Rising, which was your theme in May. And this clearly wasn't a spontaneous theme now, was it, Alex? You wrote a beautiful letter, and I would love for you to bring some of that alive for us. Why this mattered.
India changed my life when I moved there when I was 18. Really lucky to get the chance to go teach English there. When I went to the South Indian temples and saw that there could be a connection between sexuality, which for me has always been totally shame-based. All of my culture, my parents never spoke about it, and it was never allowed. And to see that this could be actually the most divine and sacred of phenomenons, it's like unbelievably, mind-blowingly inspirational. And there's obviously nothing in that in Christianity that I know of, right? Christianity has only made Pan into the devil, the god of sexuality and mischief and connection. And so this was like the greatest of permission and insight, and like all of those energies is like, it feels like, why the exquisiteness of that culture, the breadth, I mean, it's unbelievably infinite and ungrappleable. It was very scary to even contemplate, but I felt like we just have such a debt to the ancient India, to all of this great wisdom that we're all constantly learning from. This is constantly where we return to all the time. We always host Tantra. Almost all retreats, begin and end with an Om kind of thing. It's like the reference points, the key, it's the master, it's the ground. And so it's like, why are we ignoring this? And it felt edgy and difficult, but I was constantly asking a lot of South Asian friends, like, would this be okay? Why, what are the issues? What are the pinch points? And I felt at some point it was a little bit like it just moves through you and up. It's like, this is important. Come on, pay attention. Stop being cowardly. This needs, this is the most important thing right now. It's like as we become more reverential, as we start to have shrines at every event where it's an opportunity, ever since Day of the Dead, which brought up again, we've had cultural appropriation sits there at the edge all the time. Some people just fundamentally think to explore other cultures is going to be appropriative and steals power. But there, Day of the Dead, my parents had passed not long before. I'm like, this is a large part of all of our lives. We've lost family. This is an essence of what it is to be human. Can this be part of this? We actually held a grief circle there. And I'm a firm believer that ecstasy is vital to well-being and it is completely married to grief. And you need to be able to express grief, even in what you might think of as a party situation. It's a long babbling way of just saying that it felt like the most important thing we could talk about. Two words that I haven't really mentioned much, but are unbelievably important for us, are reverence and devotion. In whatever way. Now, that could be towards techno. It could be that you have a spiritual experience through listening to beats. Music is a spiritual process. But we were trying to bring that kind of level of energy. And I think in our experience of the event, it was successfully stepping up the game of bringing reverence and devotion to the forefront with a merger of sensuality, spirituality, culture.
I mean, I also just want to say that this was like years. Like we were at restaurants 2 years ago. Anyone who was South Asian, how would you feel about this? Slowly just sensing little bits before making that kind of decision. And for me, the kind of biggest motivating factor was when I thought about like what a shame and how strange it would be to limit ourselves to only like basically European themes. It just feels, I don't know, like really wrong given how deep we're exploring, because there's just so much else out there.
Can you say, Lauren, a little bit more what the Shakti Rising theme was?
Yeah. Originally, we had thought of doing a Tantra event because Tantra has always been so central. I was investigating Tantra and obviously like Kundalini kind of energies and Shakti representing the divine feminine. So that's a huge part of our events is that we have all female DJs there. It's quite rare in, I don't know of any other events
Yeah.
that do all female DJs, but this reverence of the
Wow.
feminine is, and an elevation of the feminine is really core to what we do. So then I proposed Shakti. I think we should really focus on this. It's not really feminine masculine in the same sense, but the activating force of the universe as opposed to Shiva, the kind of calm meditative side. So this is the wild act of unleashing, which is also very Fox&Badge. So how can we do this in honor of this spirit? So that was the theme. And we instantly realized this is massive. Like, where do we start? We were researching all different time periods of India, then decided actually we want to go much more ancient, which would not just include India, but huge swath of South Asia.
I was trying to do research on Shaktiism as a concept, and it's such an ancient concept that it's meant different things from century to
Yes.
century.
So trying to figure out, okay, are we talking about Shaktiism in a Hindu sense? Are we talking, because the Buddhists also have Shaktiism. It's across different religions. It's manifested in many different ways. And we decided in the end, okay, we'll have a steering committee where we can kind of, here's what we're thinking. Based on our research, these are the directions that we would like to take. We never wanted it to be a religious event, but all the Fox&Badge kind of events have a strong spiritual bent. So
Right.
how can we tread the line between spirituality without dipping into the religious and framing Shakti as kind of a non-religious concept? So the steering committee was the first place that we did that and kind of set some of the boundaries around what they didn't feel comfortable with, they didn't think would work.
And the steering committee was almost exclusively people of South Asian descent. Is that right?
They were all South Asian, yeah, except for
All
Ben.
apart from one who works. Ben is a genius researcher. He's an ex-rabbi, actually. And so he brings a kind of spirituality lapsed probably into kind of deep cerebrality. And so he was our exception a little bit. But
Exceptional researcher, yeah.
when we started thinking about this theme, it felt like the divine feminine was at the core of it, and Shakti, the figure of Shakti. And as we started to explore, we realized that Hinduism, which it seems like Shakti belongs to, isn't actually a coherent monolith. It's not like a series of coherent scriptures that all emerged at once kind of thing. It's a growing, evolving, melting pot of cultures that actually got most determined by the British Raj in the 19th century. And that the figure of Shakti actually was even before the first vestiges of Hinduism had emerged and has spread in other cultures outside. So we like, wow, there's so much to process. We don't really have any expertise in this. How can we not kind of put our blind, kind of biased, white privileged kind of lens on this, but actually be more open to many more points of view? So we just started, I think I asked about 50 people, quite randomly. And it's worth bearing in mind that we have to move at speed. We've just finished our last event. We've only got 9 weeks till this. So we just asked lots of people, could you help us? Some of those people are kind of well attuned, some of them not, some of them have been, some of them not. But we asked 50 South Asians, could you help us guide this event? Could you give us your authentic insights? We would love you to just speak clearly. How does this feel for you? So we ended up with 20 people initially to kind of help frame and allow this project. And we had the very first starting point. You know, I had my assumptions and presuppositions about all of this. I was like, oh my God, we're going to do the Shiva dance and then Kali with all her heads. And we had dinner and they're like, you can't have any religious imagery. And so quite quickly, it was quite clear. There was like, well, there was polite disagreement, sometimes impolite disagreement, but there was like
Fair
complexity. We weren't trying to choose any kind of people that would hate this event to ever happen, but we were trying to choose a kind of breadth who would kind of well serve the birth of this into a real viable project. So, you know, in another process, I would probably, if I could have had more time to do all of that, I would have found curators and I would have found other elements. But that was how we started discussing that, and it was up for a vote. Like, should we even call this Shakti? Is this like a transgression? Is this too religious? Is it too Hindu? And we came to the not consensual but majority decision that actually this was a very valuable concept, Shakti, that we could explore in a non-religious way, which would still allow devotion and reverence, but not religiosity. And I think that was the very core of the problem that would then arise. And I think if we hadn't called it Shakti, we would have had quite a different path.
Interesting. When I was reading up on the event, and once I wrapped my head around it, the thing I really liked about it was that it's designed to center two groups of attendees who aren't always centered at these types of events, erotic events, raves, whatever you want to call them, which is women. As you said, all the DJs are women. There's the Shakti theme. And then people of South Asian descent. And I really like both of those goals. I've got friends who are people of color, and they've told me that they don't go to sex parties or erotic parties because they feel incredibly out of place and unwelcome and self-conscious. And they just feel like these are white events where they're not welcome. And so to try to correct that by centering a different group, that's what really perked my interest about this event.
Yeah.
And I think that's a noble pursuit.
That's quite interesting, because I felt like actually one of the criticisms was that most of our guests are white, and so that we were putting on a theme and then just inviting white people to enjoy it. But I was surprised we had almost 25% like South Asian descent just by scanning by name of this, which is the highest that we have ever had. And so it's like people being attracted to the different themes based on what they want to explore. It's not just that everyone comes to every Fox&Badge.
I don't think it's been mentioned yet that almost all of your musical artists and DJs were of South Asian descent as well.
Yeah, they all were. They all were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the artist and the steering committee was very well represented.
So I want to share that on the day that you released the theme, I probably got about 6 or maybe 7 messages that day from people who are not South Asian, who are white, saying, what do you think of this? And I think it was their nerves. They were like, oh crap, like, is Nyla going to think something of me if I go to this event? Like, what is her reaction? Like, how should I gauge where I should stand on something like this? And so I read it the day that it came out. And honestly, I thought it was beautiful. Okay. As a South Asian person, I was like, I applaud you for celebrating this culture. And I remember reading through the description that it wasn't a religious event. And, you know, I feel like you put your intent across so beautifully. And I had these like, you know, inquiring minds asking me like, is this something I should be nervous about or offended by? Are you offended? And I remember sharing with everyone that I think it's a beautiful thing that we can celebrate South Asian culture. There's so many gorgeous things about it. You know, a lot of South Asians, myself included, have difficult relationships with our own culture for various reasons. We're all kind of third culture kids now anyways, but I think there's a lot of complexity and challenge in me celebrating my own culture. But if somebody wanted an insight into my culture or just celebrate the different beautiful aspects of South Asian culture, what's not to like about that? I love it. And I think for me, the real test was, will the organizers center the talent? Because really, that's ultimately what is, for me, a matter of integrity. Like, do you take the theme, but then also embrace it in a way that you center the talent, you center the arts, the culture, the kind of spectrum of what's available here? And it already felt like you were doing that, because I could see that in the artists that you already were talking about and through your socials. So personally, I had no issue with it.
In terms of platforming the South Asian performers and DJs, I just don't think we could have done it without doing that. Like, they were the heart of the event. We can't provide that. So, you know, it was them bringing these gifts, bringing chanting, kirtan, singing. Actually, I think the most moving piece of feedback for me from the whole event was from one of our DJs who just explained that she's rarely at an event where she's DJing with other women, never DJed an event where she was DJing with other South Asian women, never been asked to play music from her culture in a mainstream setting. So
that's gorgeous. There are probably so many firsts there, you know, for a lot of people of our culture. So I really resonate with how powerful that must have felt for them.
Yeah, and I think everyone there can also feel that. And so feel that people are excited to bring something that's very sacred and precious to them from their heritage to a mainstream place with people who may not have been exposed to it before. You know, watching people try Bollywood dancing for the first time and kirtan and stuff is yeah, it was just joyful. It was absolutely joyful in that room. It made me feel like I really wish the people who, because I don't think there was a lot of, some people were angry about it, but a lot of people, as you said, were just really nervous. They just didn't want to do something that was wrong.
Yeah.
So they didn't come because they just felt really insecure about potentially being immoral or...
In the run-up to the event, I was involved with multiple conversations about outfits with people. Is it okay to wear this?
Work.
Can I wear a bindi? Does that mean something? Like, would this outfit work? So I felt like people were making a significant effort to bring sensitivity to how they approached and engaged in the theme. But it also showed me that there is so much nervousness about putting a foot wrong here. You know, like, am I going to completely be outed for being somebody who's a dumbass because I didn't know that you're not supposed to, you know, do this in this way? And I almost felt like I wanted to say, you can relax, like, it's a safe space. You can ask me the dumb questions, like, I'll help you figure this out. But also, I'm kind of figuring it out too. You know, there's some obvious things about religious symbols and stuff which are likely to upset some people, so probably don't go there. But thank you for showing enough curiosity to want to know in the first place, because I feel like South Asians have suffered enough over the years, and living and growing up in the UK, like, it's not really something that celebrated our culture. And so having grown up, you know, with South Asian fashion and events and things like that, you always feel like it's very separate to your British identity. And I welcome this because it was an opportunity to embrace wholeness in that way. So anyways, I just wanted to throw that out there as my perspective and experience of being on the receiving end of all the beautiful intention that I thought you put out.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
We've kind of launched into some of the things that were challenging about the event. There's so much complexity, and there's layers here, and just looking across some of the comments and the challenges of the critiques that people had, I felt like there were maybe 3 or 4 categories that things fell within, and help me understand if this felt right. But the one around, is it cultural appreciation or is it appropriation? Should I dress like this? Did we consult enough? The comments that revolve around that piece. Then there's the piece around, like, the sacredness and the spirituality and religion. You want to respect the sacredness, but you don't want to offend, and so not having those religious symbols in the same way. And the third category was, like, the sexualization and the fetishization aspect. And I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit. We also had a couple of people share some reflections about how complex and layered that is. Not that it was something that you intentionally did, but that there is complexity in the system already around race and around South Asian bodies being, you know, fetishized in some way. And so even when intentions are good, historical patterns and archetypes can get activated, right?
So complex. I mean, I feel every female body gets objectified. And interestingly enough, you know, we often have highly erotic performances. We actually didn't have any South Asian performers doing the most erotic work because we felt that there was a little bit of a danger there of us, like, looking like we're objectifying kind of thing. That was a sensitivity all around. I think there is a kind of difficult truth to acknowledge that, like, there is the clear precedent of sacred sexuality that is clearest in India, depicted through all this kind of artwork, Kama Sutra, temple and stuff. That is there as an invitation. And in a funny way, it felt a little weak that we didn't represent that well, but we were really on the back foot and, like, we need to be ultra careful here. And I sort of regret that. I felt like that shame crept in a little bit. And so you're never going to fail to offend someone. You know, the erotic is it would offend my parents if they were around. You know, it would offend loads of my friends. It does, you know, and so we have to embrace and be brave around that. But, like, respect is key. Are we operating from respect? And I think that's the key anxiety underneath cultural appropriation, is you're not respecting. And I think that was the key thing that we were always trying to honor, is, like, ensuring that we're respecting in every way.
You touched a little bit, Alex, before today around how some of the biggest challenges actually came from people in the kink space.
Well, I guess it's hard to describe. I think those that have escaped classification and rigidity and found themselves and found a new freedom often need restrictions to protect that freedom. I think sometimes, and that can become quite rigid. There's definitely potentially a rigidity in certain kink spaces around certain things. It was interesting, the more we inquired, the more we discovered that people hadn't read anything that we put out there, that there was a kind of snap judgment of, right, this is what it looks like, it must be disrespectful. But it was interesting, and who knows how long that alienation, that kind of wound will last. I think those spaces are fragile, vulnerable, they need protection. And so that protector just races in to just say, look, this isn't safe, and is hyper concerned.
I think the kink space, that freedom is precious. People in those communities have been rejected, probably in different spaces and communities, and they want that to feel really safe. And so they are going to fight for anyone they think is taking advantage of that, or trying to capitalize from it, or trying to bring in values that are not aligned. So I think one of it is this protective instinct, but I also really felt that there was a kind of desire to be shaming of others and slightly what I think I could start to sense, because actually the most telling one for me was a friend sent a lot of screenshots from a private WhatsApp chat of people in this kink community and their kind of glee at tearing apart the event. And so, Aldous Huxley said the most intoxicating feeling in the world is righteousness, because it feels so freaking good to be right. And so just feeding this feeling of they're bad, we're good, or this is the ideal, the core value, and this is violating it. I think we live in a very uncertain world, and I think that clarity is really, people want that. People really crave, okay, what's right, what's wrong, how can we categorize these things?
Yeah, just even to have this whole conversation, I was telling Nyla beforehand, isn't it a shame that the number one emotion I'm feeling in advance of this conversation is apprehension and fear of saying the wrong thing? And I think even listeners are going to tune into this episode almost looking for that, oh, how are they going to mess up? What's the thing they're going to say wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
Which in an hour-long conversation about curiosity and figuring out how to do the right thing, people are looking for where you mess up. But I think it's a real shame that when things do get controversial in ways like this, our tendency is to start looking for the flaws rather than the potential for growth or learning. That whole mindset, I think, is a huge problem that we need to get to the heart of.
It's hard to hold tension, isn't it, and discomfort. There's so much complexity and multiplicity, multiple truths can coexist here. But as you said, Lauren, we have a desire for certainty around things so that we can feel like we're in the right box or in the right place where we're not going to be attacked. And I think it is brave to kind of create this kind of dialogue across difference and try to find ways that we can have some meaningful conversation and just remember what healthy disagreement looks like. We talk about this a lot, right, Cole? We have an episode in season 1, episode 5, I think it was, about have we forgotten how to disagree with each other? Because we almost want there to be binaries here. We forget that there's multiple perspectives. It's not just right and wrong, but holding that middle ground and holding that space where you're willing to change a strongly held position with some new information, and you're open, keep your heart open and your mind open to being convinced otherwise and seeing the intention behind things as well.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to touch on was how contagious fear is. We could feel everyone getting afraid, and we were then getting afraid. And so one thing that I usually do, and then I've outsourced it to others increasingly, is write costume posts. And we do quite a lot of it. We write probably 30 separate dedicated costume posts. Take a lot of care about it. It takes a lot of time. And for this one, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be huge. How do I do this? How do I represent the depth? Our instructions to the guests had been quite prohibitive of please don't wear anything unless you've researched it. It's quite tough, it's quite hard to set an event that way.
Yeah.
Please, understand the bindi or the nath with a bridal nath or the forehead ornament and so on. Like, understand what the story is before you choose to do that. And it was becoming very heavy in a way. People were writing in and saying, please make sure when you write about gold, you explain that that was the currency with which family wealth was handed down and it could only go through the female line. It's like so much importance, so much. And it's like, oh yeah, oh my God, I really got to get this right and prevent everyone from like misunderstanding.
Oh my God, the pressure. The pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, I read through the costume guidelines.
Yeah.
The costume guidelines on the invitation, and it is very in depth. Just when you think it's going to end, it keeps going.
Yeah. I mean, we did have that.
Very carefully worded.
Yeah, but it's quite a struggle. So,
yeah.
I mean, time was the number one issue, but there was also, we started getting into a fear state. Like, I felt very anxious opening our Instagram because certain posts would, if they triggered one person to say, like, how dare you do this event, or this is disgusting, or like quite hostile, it would pile on very quickly. So I was like, do we remove some of these, which are really incendiary and not very helpful, or do we just let it keep going?
Oh, the world of online hate where you can hide behind a username, right?
Yeah.
People become so hostile so quickly.
So there was also like a bit of anxiety about, okay, if we put out daily costume posts, we're going to spend all of our time managing these quite intense online debates and conversations, which we were already having in direct messages and everywhere. So.
Yeah, like, will we have to turn comments off, which feels very undemocratic?
In some ways, I can reflect on the intent that people might have when they make criticism. Maybe they're trying to shut down something they think would be offensive to a lot of people. But in other ways, you know, I wish they would choose kinder words to inform and invite and to have a different kind of conversation, because the act of venting in the way that people often do online is not often the best way of getting across your point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there was such a huge range, right? There were some hostile, quite even one sort of threatening person. And then once we're like, hey, I'm just like a little concerned. What does this mean? And then others who reached out directly and offered loads of advice. That's how we found the person who ended up curating our live music room, was a guy who, amazing musician from a Brahmin family, who was like, I would like to steer you in this direction, I think. And then he became like one of our largest collaborators. So I think it's really helpful to have these discussions. I want to have these discussions, but when it feels violent, it's just so unhelpful. And I think that's kind of what we struggled with. And we ended up writing a new, Alex wrote a code of kind of conduct for our communications. So what we would remove and what we would keep, and trying to help there.
What we're starting to move into is the experience you actually had at the event. So before we go into a little bit more of how other people responded to it, take me back to the day itself, the evening itself. How did it feel? Where was your energy? Were you racing around? What came alive that night?
Yeah, so I was leading our decor team, and it was, we just had ordered really amazing things for this. It was very exciting to transform the space. Heaven is a Beautiful nightclub. And I think we had 4 or 5 South Asians on the team. And it was really cool to get their input. We were hanging up some garland and she was like, no, those are for entryways, so they should come here. So, you know, we had loads of marigolds. Really researched, like, not just looks South Asian, but has some meaning behind it.
Sure.
I mean, to be honest, all of the anxiety, all of the challenges came before the event for me. As soon as the event started, it was like I could feel how it was different from other events personally. Just like looking at the crowd and seeing, oh, wow, this feels like a different community. This has brought maybe a different community in and together. And the night opened, the dance floors opened, but we also had the kirtan in our live music room. So that was happening at the same time that the DJs are starting their sets and everyone's starting to mill around and find their way in the festival. We didn't have as many people as we normally do, which was a challenge. That was a real casualty of the PR. But then for me, the poof, like I'm here standout moment was when Miriam Shakiba did her opening traditional dance. Odissi dance. And I don't know. It just felt like this is on another level. She had had her own back and forth and then said, no, actually, I want to do this. I want to bring this to this space. It was the same with many of our collaborators. They're like, these are sacred practices for us, but like it's important that God or the sacred comes to the people, not that they always have to go to temples or consecrated spaces to be touched and moved. And getting like very emotional talking about it, but it was like I just was like, thank you for bringing this here, and you could see people's faces just stunned.
Yeah.
It was exquisite. I was just melting. My arm hair is going crazy right now, remembering it. And I don't normally cry at our events, but we both wept watching Mariam because it was so exquisite and so moving and so real. And so I think
a lifetime of work
for all of our,
her practice.
she is totally in devotion to this, and we can feel that, and it's so authentic and so real, and it's just an absolutely magical energy transfer. And so I think this is impossible for most people to believe and fathom. They're like, this is a dark hole of mad depravity, of hedonism, and there's no way that that can coexist, right? That's the category kind of focus a little bit. It's like, no. For me, arriving once the event has started, what tends to happen is adrenaline suppresses fear. Some part of me is like, oh my God, like, do we have to be worried about our physical safety? Like, will someone like pull out placards? Will they pull out the cables, prevent this from happening? The kind of destructive sabotage boycott instinct. We were afraid, and some of our team were afraid, and we had to speak and say, look, don't worry.
Boycott.
There were direct requests for boycott, but there was like the sense of like, could we be sabotaged? But like I went there and I was like, one experience I had with working with South Asians in this was there was such an exquisite gentleness and knowingness that I haven't really experienced with other cultures. It was like so much like, yeah, we'll work it out. Yeah, this is cool. It's fine. Don't worry, kind of thing. Let's work through it. Kind of so much kind of equanimity. So strong, and I felt this kind of real power of like, we're gonna get through this. This is good. It's good, particularly from our leads, like Yash leading the music room, Vitsano leading all of the DJ stuff, and so I feel so grateful for that.
We collected some comments and reactions from participants and attendees, and I thought it'd be useful to share some of them. Also just because we were conscious to bring in some more South Asian voices into this conversation, even indirectly.
Yes.
A few that really jumped out to me, one of the musical artists said, "My musical journey has always been guided by a desire to weave the rich spiritual tapestry of my Indian roots into the electronic spaces I love. To be involved in an event that honors the divine cosmic energy of Shakti, and to have had the platform to represent my culture in the most beautiful, authentic, and respectful way possible means absolutely everything to me." And then another that I thought just put it a lot more simply, "It was my own culture, and it was really great to see people dressed up in ways that I would otherwise experience only at weddings."
There was one lady who reached out and shared a piece, which I'll read. She just shared a reflection. She said, I went to Shakti Rising along with my partner. I'd heard lots of good things about Fox&Badge, and one of the reasons I went to this one was because the theme resonated so much. She's South Asian. She said, I did wonder how the event would run so that it was a celebration rather than some bastardized fancy dress. Ahead of the event, I found other people to be quite sensitive about their outfits, and some sought advice from me, and some others stuck to the outfit guidelines on the Pinterest board that Fox&Badge provided. Some stayed away from cultural wear altogether to avoid offence. She said, I'm not one to keep my mouth shut if something irks me, and would have happily caused a ruckus in the middle of the club on the night if I felt disrespected. However, I thought it was really well done. I spoke with people on the night who'd visited India and had deep interest, along with some who admitted they lacked awareness, but they were interested in expanding their understanding. She said, the biggest concern for me around religion and being mindful of religious symbols and practices and attire came when I first entered.
She was worried about the shrines.
Yeah. Their whole sacred meaning and deserve respect. I didn't believe that these should have formed any part of the event. My heart rate did rise on the night when I saw what looked like temples and mandirs, and when I looked closer, they had flowers rather than religious idols that would normally be found in them, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief. So I think that feels like it's walking that very sensitive path, right?
I have to say, I found it like the most rewarding event I've ever run, because I was like really paranoid that like we can't do this justice. We're white people, we just don't understand, just like there's this huge insecurity, huge perfectionism around it, and it's like we'll never be enough, we'll never be able to. And having a lot of South Asians I've never met coming up, finding me and saying, I feel so celebrated, so safe. It just felt validating as an effort, as a first attempt, as a little baby step, that actually at least we could authentically celebrate and honor and respect, and learn.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really do any of the events. They're always creating a container. It's just bringing a constellation of people together and providing some kind of direction and form and support, logistics, setting, all of that stuff. But
yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think it's important to acknowledge how courageous and difficult it is to walk that boundary in a really sensitive way, right? I don't know if we said this already, but the South Asian community itself is not a monolith, right? Of course, you're never going to please everybody, and there's always going to be some challenge. So
also listening to each other. I mean, as you said, the South Asian community is not a monolith. So what I started noticing with certain people where they would say, stop stealing my culture, and talking about like not wanting people to wear saris. And I'm like, well, this person just said they're really excited that people are wearing saris from their culture. And so this idea of like who owns the culture and gets to make the decisions, like I wanted to tell people, I'm like, we're getting really mixed messages, and that's because everyone feels differently, and everyone like we have to make decisions at some point as an artistic endeavor, and we're going to try to make the best choice that we can based on the information that we have and try to do that with support. But yeah, I think those were some of the most challenging ones for me, when it felt like someone was saying we're personally harming or mocking or destroying their culture, when that had sort of also come from a directly different position from another person in the community. But
Well, and I've been wanting to say, the point of this episode was not to put the Shakti Rising event on trial, one way or the other. I mean, we're just 4 people with 4 different opinions and life experiences. There's a lot of other people who are going to have very strong ones, and I don't think we're setting out to try to prove anyone wrong.
Yeah.
But what do we do with the fact that, I mean, the 2 of you and the entire steering committee put so much effort into doing this right, so much research, so much sensitivity, and you still offended people. People were still hurt. So I guess 2 questions I have is, how do we reconcile that? Are these things still worth doing? And I guess, how do we learn to disagree with each other? Because I think I was saying earlier, just even having this conversation is so fraught, because the Aldous Huxley quote, people look to confirm their own righteousness rather than learn. And I'm really interested in overcoming that whole mentality of just people seeking to confirm their own righteousness rather than to learn and connect with each other. I'm still trying to figure out how we do that better.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me, like, it's so hard to tell. How do we have these conversations, I think, is the biggest question, because the tension was really about like how people interpreted the event before it happened. I would be really curious if a lot of those people came, how they would feel, but I think there was a closeness. They didn't really want to see how they would feel, or maybe it was just like way too out of their comfort zone. Totally fine.
I think this is a highly challenging thing in this world where we're online. As you said, we don't see each other because we're not really having a conversation. We're kind of broadcasting. And so it doesn't really ever become a conversation space like A, B, A, B. It's just A, and then pause, and then B, 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 you know? And so I remember we run into this cultural appropriation thing all the time. You know, our first time we experienced it was in 2017 or 18, where we ran an event called Religion. And it was in our early immature phase of being a bit more provocateur, a satire of Catholicism. We don't really satirize anymore. We're much more reverential. But something came up, and there was like a whole online pile on. And what I remember at the time saying, guys, this is getting really heated. I'm going to invite you all round to my living room. Let's have a discussion. No one wanted that. No one wanted to chat. They just wanted to vent and broadcast. And I think it's still the same. It's like, as this was coming up, we were like, guys, we can't have a discussion in the comments section where you're just all kind of shouting kind of thing. Let's have a chat. But where? No one wants to do that. Not no one. Some people did. Some people engaged privately. But like, we are losing the ability to have a conversation. We're texting, we're broadcasting and all that stuff, but we're very out of that kind of face-to-face inquiry mode. Inquiry is already difficult enough. I find it difficult. And so it would have been lovely to just all get in the room and just bear the pain and the confrontation and then learn from each other. But that's not an easy thing to do, and I really wish somehow we could do that, you know?
I mean, for me, this has only made me want to go more into exploring cultures outside of Europe, because I'm like, wow, first of all, get to meet amazing people who can bring the depth of their practices to this space and share it. We get to really delve into something, be a platform for communities that wouldn't have such a mainstream platform focusing on their community in London. But it also just, feels terrifying to like step into that again. So it's kind of like, was it worth it? It feels worth it, but I don't know.
What I feel like is, in approaching anything similar to this, I would start another event like this, probably with an open discussion in person. If it was possible, I don't think it is possible, by the way, but make the offer. I mean, maybe it is, and say, we would like to discuss, here are the pinch points that we perceive around this. We did try to do that, to be honest. Very beginning of this, we had, I think, 12 people in this room. Of the 20, open discussions, we just listened. And there's some kind of gentle disagreements and whatever, but like, just do that harder and maybe more publicly. I think the key thing, we're never going to manage to earn trust from everyone. And I think we probably also need to be braver still. Like, I really regretted when people made these public comments. I was in conversation with advisors, PR people, ChatGPT. ChatGPT was too timid, I think. It was like, don't talk, don't say anything, don't make a public statement, don't oxygenate the fire kind of thing. I regret that. That felt out of integrity. It felt inauthentic to be silent. Then we're not even honoring their statements with addressing them. And I felt like that was a real mistake. So I think some bravery, but it is exhausting, and to sort of find some kind of way of preserving energy. And Port Lauren was at the face of this. It's such a difficult environment, and so to find some way of moderating how much we can receive of that, but still engaging to the minimum. Lauren did fully engage online and in messages. I would really love to be brave enough to continue this kind of work, because for me this was a huge step up, huge, and it really felt like a very generous response from a range of cultures for us to really fuse, explore. It was a miracle. And so to step back into retreat of licking wounds, even though this is very difficult, it was very financially difficult for us. It caused us trauma. And so we have to see this clearly. Those that sought to protect, they sought to protect cultures, and they destroyed their ability. They deplatformed people. These moves were like, they removed budget, they removed audience. People flew in from Delhi to do this, and they didn't have enough people there to watch them because these people have called for a boycott. It's like, what are you doing? Why can't you let these people do their work? You think we're interfering. We're not really. We're trying to get out of the way. We kept saying that. It's hard.
Curiosity is a two-way street, right? And I think what you're talking about is like, you're meeting people where they are. And sometimes that creates this difficult space, because you're being not only well-intentioned, but you're creating openness that maybe is far beyond where some of these people are able to reach. We only had really a final closing question, which was just, how are you feeling emotionally, spiritually after coming through something like this? It's so much to integrate.
Oof. I think I actually felt really surprised and shocked at how beautiful the event was. Like, I felt I had absorbed a lot of the negativity. I started having serious doubts about whether we should do this and whether we could do this justice. It was already difficult, and now all these people are like pointing out how wrong it is. But on the night, it was beautiful watching the guests and performers just in total flow. It felt so right. I was like, I don't think feeling this much joy, probably one of our most joyful events, I can't see anything inherently evil or wrong about this. And then our crew drinks the next night, which was when we really heard from a lot of these collaborators, these South Asian DJs and the performers about how meaningful it was to them. I was just filled up to the brim for like weeks. And yeah, I feel really, I don't know, in a way touched to go through that full experience of like the challenge and then trying to figure it out and really bonding with people through it. And I mean, all the events bring up some challenges, and I think to meet them with courage was a lesson for me of like, if this intention is good, then keep going, you know, because actually the result from that was totally worth it.
Yeah, it was a very painful process. It was very stressful, and there is still stress and pain there. There is loss, there's grief, there's death, death of friendships, death of working relationships. And, you know, someone rightly pointed out, dude, you chose Shakti. What the fuck did you expect? This is a purification ritual. And it's like, yeah, it was like a kind of great, we're not allowed fire in the venue, but we certainly had fire in our fucking community. And so there was a great purging. And there were people who were very precious to me that I am now not connected to, that won't speak to me. And that's where we're at currently. And that may change. Who knows? I found it an exquisite event. And I found our collaborations of the kind of very highest of depth. And they would move me. My arm hairs have been going crazy all through this podcast as I remember all these moments. And I'm so touched. We built relationships. You know, if you could have been there at the crew drinks, to hear the South Asians saying, you need to do this every year. We need, you know, there's such a sense of joyous, because of course it's infinite. There's so much to explore. And so that sense that we all had this collective excitement, the joy in the room, that the different vibe of the event, this fresh, alert openness. I really feel, you know, India, I feel there's a range to that culture that we cannot comprehend in this tiny island. It is always a great invitation. So out of that, you know, Yash Soham led our kirtan and was always fighting and saying, all those people that are trying to tell you that religiosity, you know, this is a religious thing and you can't have it in a nightclub, are wrong. This isn't what kirtan is. Kirtan is something which overcomes all of that, which opens it out beyond the Brahma class, which is against singularity of religion, singularity of language, is open to all, for us all to access devotionalism, not religiosity. It's perfect. What else can do that? Christianity doesn't have this. And so then creating this exquisite space, which now ripples onwards, because now we have a weekly chanting group. And then we did it at Ritual at our last event. Wow. So like, he changed us, you know, he's changed our genetic code, right? This is exactly what we want. We're all about, I didn't even use this word yet, but transformation. That's our holy grail. And so we were transformed in this. We learned and we continue to learn. He continues to guide us. We continue to explore what is that reverential devotional space. And so I'm deeply grateful for that. We will continue to grow, inquire, and try and be brave, try and be sensible as we explore the most fertile growth spaces for us all.
I want to really thank you both for even being willing to revisit, you know, all the pain and all the memories and being willing to discuss all these things really openly and thoughtfully. It's made for a hugely fascinating discussion for me, a really difficult one. So thanks for that.
I just wanted to close by saying that we are all building bridges here between different worlds. So this kind of thing doesn't just resolve itself, you know, and we don't just have a conversation about it and like move forward. How do we continue to honor both curiosity and sensitivity? But it opens up a dialogue. So there's a space for conversation and for staying open rather than for shutting each other down.
Yeah. Huge gratitude to you both for your deep compassion and your balancing of it all.
Thank you
guys
so much.
Before we close, we wanted to come back to a couple of things we've reflected on since the conversation. Alex and Lauren poured enormous amounts of thought, work, and energy into the Shakti Rising event, and from everything we've heard from people who attended, it sounds like it was a pretty powerful night. As Lauren told us, most of the big criticism happened before the event, rather than from people's experiences of the night itself. And I think it's because what underlined a big part of the criticism was a question that we sort of failed to name directly in the conversation. And that is it ever possible or valid to put on a celebration of a culture that isn't your own? And particularly when there are significant power imbalances between those two groups in society. Is just the premise of that fundamentally extractive, even when the goal is to create a platform for that culture and when you've collaborated deeply with people from it?
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction. And I think it's where all those kind of different histories and different sensitivities come in, right? Because Alex and Lauren weren't just presented with concerns and then carrying on regardless. They worked really hard to have a steering committee and a whole roster of South Asian artists who were actually driving and delivering the event. Lauren described how Fox&Badge kind of provided the container, if you like, but the event was South Asian run. So there was real intent in listening to the guidance they were getting, and they actively changed things. They removed religious elements that they'd initially thought might work. They evolved the dress code guidance. They continued adapting the whole thing up until the night itself. And still, there are people for whom none of these challenges really resolve the fundamental concern that they had, which is that Alex and Lauren are creating an event centered on a culture that isn't theirs. They're not South Asian. So that's where this gets really interesting, actually, because there isn't necessarily a compromise here that would make those two positions meet.
Right. And we've heard throughout the episode that thoughtful people can look at exactly the same situation and come to completely different conclusions. And there's real hurt in this story. Personal and professional relationships were bruised. In some cases, they were severed. Alex and Lauren explained that they put a lot of these very contested decisions up to a vote, such as the name of the event. But some people who disagreed with those decisions came away just feeling like they hadn't been heard.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because you can listen to someone carefully, you can take their perspective seriously, and yet if the group decision takes it a different way, that doesn't mean you didn't respect that perspective or you didn't hear them. And that's part of what we're learning here, is that there are multiple truths present, and recognizing that another person's perspective doesn't have to cancel out mine. I think that's really hard to do in practice, right? Especially when we hold our position so strongly. So someone can have felt celebrated by Shakti Rising, but somebody else could have felt really deeply uncomfortable with the idea itself. And I think Alex and Lauren acted with genuine care and intention to create something beautiful and reverent and respectful. But some people would have always still experienced it very different from how they intended that.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is really in learning how to hold all of these truths without immediately collapsing it into right and wrong.
I mean, that's fundamentally what we're trying to practice at Deviants. Not perfect agreement, but better disagreement, more curiosity, more willingness to hear each other. We actually did a whole episode on this back in season 1. I think it was episode 5, Have We Forgotten How to Disagree? So if this conversation has got you thinking about how we hold difference without immediately trying to defeat it, I would encourage you to go back and check that one out too.
And this definitely adds another layer into it, right? I think with every further season, we're getting deeper and deeper into all of these things. And maybe an invitation for all of us is to think about where in our own lives could we practice listening to perspectives that are deeply different to our own without needing anyone to change their mind. You know, can we get curious enough to understand why the world looks different from where they stand, while still honoring the position we have and where we stand? Because I think that would genuinely help us to step into someone's shoes for a moment and just see what's going on in their mind. And I just want to say we genuinely love to hear your thoughts on what this episode brought up for you, especially if you disagree with something you've heard, or you feel we didn't quite capture the full essence of something, or we missed something. This has been a challenging one for us too, hasn't it, Cole?
What? Nah.
So our details are in the episode notes, and we'd love to keep evolving this conversation and sharing this learning experience with all of you as well.
Yeah, well put. So until next time, you know the drill. Stay kind, stay curious, and stay just a little bit deviant.
Just a smidge.
See you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.